The galaxy of intellectuals, Honorable President Sir, Honorable Judges, my opponents and my friends. Today the motion reads, strong states make strong nations. And I, Samriddhi Mishra, am a staunch supporter of this view. But before I even tell you why, I must clarify, this is not a radical call for the supremacy of the states. All I'm contending is that the former is an essential precondition for the existence of the latter. By strong states, I mean states which are fiscally capable and administratively strong so they can become laboratories for innovation. Further, we must recognize that federalism is not an unbendable concept. There are multiple versions of federalism that these states and the nations around the world have adopted themselves to after assessing what federalism could mean to them. But no matter what sort of federalism exists, whether that be holding together or coming together federalism, strong states is an essential requisite which stands. But let's begin easy and let's converse India. Our Constituent Assembly, in their infinite wisdom, recognized that India could not be governed by a distant, monolithic center. B.N. Rao, the advisor to the Constituent Assembly, articulated that states are not subsidiaries, but rather co-equal partners to the center in the new Indian Federation. He was actually an advocate for a true federation, but both the center and the states derived their power from the Constitution itself. All of this to articulate, honorable judges, the fact that the importance of strong states has been recognized and revered by genius minds for centuries. This brings me to my first argument, which is that strong states can help a nation in tumultuous times. The inclusion of public health in the state list of the Indian Constitution, for example, has proven to be remarkably effective because it has allowed states to respond contextually to crisis. Allow me to exemplify. In January of 2020, when Corona had newly entered India, Kerala became the first state to declare that there was a public health emergency and thereby deployed coordinated responses at state, district, and local levels. It leveraged the constitutional autonomy that it had to come up with innovative measures like the creation of first-line treatment centers. Now, by June of 2020, when Corona raged elsewhere, Kerala maintained an impressive recovery rate of 51.7% with a significantly low mortality rate. Now this, my friends, this is no accident. This is the result of decades of investment in a decentralized public healthcare system. While all the other states also had the same constitutional autonomy, they lacked the institutional strength. But if all these states had the same institutional strength, would India not have inevitably been in a better position? This brings me to my second argument, which has an economic dimension, which I believe Montek Singh Ahluwalia, a renowned economist, articulated it the best. He said that strengthening of state finances leads to productivity growth and private investment and in turn economic development. It cannot be undermined. India's economic miracle is as much a gift of its state enterprises as it is a gift of national policy. For example, Gujarat only covers 6% of the total landmass, but because it is so aggressive in updating its industrial policies and infrastructure, it has led to 8% of the contribution of the GDP as per the Hindu and more than 20% of the exports. But why even limit ourselves to India? There are plethora of examples available internationally that would demonstrate full well how competitive federalism has fostered economic powerhouses of states, which have in turn strengthened the nation. The US is the world's foremost economy, and a large reason behind that is because it is a federation of economically powered states. The states therein independently house the global headquarters of multi-billion-dollar giants. This is because these states compete in order to provide the more fertile ground, whether that be through specialized labor pools or through low business taxes. Now, this decentralized system means that the economic wealth is diversified and localized. The dynamism of Silicon Valley in California, or the financial services concentration in New York, or the energy sector dominance in Texas are all independent state successes, but in turn, they shield the entire nation against any sort of localized downturn. By the same logic, when these states are weak, the entire nation suffers because these underfunded and poorly governed states relies heavily on central transfer, and the net effect is what you would expect it to be: poverty. Now this brings me to my third argument, which is that strong states have the ability to identify and address any pockets of inefficiency that may be missed by the center given the sheer distance. Now I must reinforce that this is because the states are very often led by the people who come from the same soil as the people from those that they govern, which means that they are better attuned to local realities. The motion is not that strong states are the routine and they have unexceptionally created strong nations. No, it is rather the potential that we are discussing. So with that context, allow me to exemplify. So the exemplification comes from Akshay Mangla's study on Himachal Pradesh's education model proving to be extremely effective. It is because they realize under the new education policies and centers regulations that traditional implementation was going to be impossible because of the diverse settlements and because of the settlements and the nomadic tribes, etc. So they brought the schools to the children rather than taking the children to the school. Now this is contextual understanding translating national policies into actual local realities. But this I come to my last argument, which is that weak states breed corruption. Allow me to exemplify this for you with an example that would require no further elaboration. So Nigeria is Africa's largest oil producer. What would you think? That this is a blueprint for shared prosperity? But no, because of decades of over centralization, all of the oil revenue is funneled directly to the central government in Abuja, and all that the states are left with are meager fixed allocations. Now this breeds institutional incapacity from the states from protecting any oil bunkering, which is the illegal tapping of pipelines. For all of these reasons, I contend that strength is best when it is distributed. We cannot be scared or suspicious of strong states. Rather, we must endeavor to bring them around. As Roman philosopher Sallust most aptly put it, harmony makes small things grow. The lack of it makes great things decay. Thank you very much. If you had to reframe your question in one line, to what do you want an answer to? What is that question? Of course, thank you very much. You have contended that I have only put forth decentralized examples. The Nigerian example was quite literally an over centralized system. Of course. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for reframing my question, reframing that question, because that strengthens my point. There are different realities that exist across the entire realm of the universe, right? So we do witness that there are very different models of federalism. So I have also taken into account the federalism that is highly competitive of US, and I've also taken example of an over centralized state, which is Nigeria. All of this to demonstrate to you when how we discuss this motion. The motion is not that there exist around the globe only strong states which have only routinely and ubiquitously created strong nations. No. What we are talking about is the potential. So if I don't tap into these different realities which suffer from different sociological landscapes, of course US has a very different landscape to the landscape that we have in India, but in the same way that I can contend that the 1970 crisis that happened in Quebec, Canada, which was an internal security crisis wherein separatist terrorists kidnapped certain officials, and in the manner that the state that existed in Canada managed to deal with that threat while taking that same example parallelly to the example of Bastar, where the states where these states play a very proactive role in managing whatever Maoism or realities that the Bastar tribals are faced with. But both of these examples do require a certain level of policing and autonomy to the state being granted, so they can all effectively deal with these internal security threats. All of this to demonstrate that no matter what reality exists, whether you go from Australia to Canada to Nigeria to India, whatever example you take, you need strong states. May I even go further, if you believe that I've taken independent examples, to an example which would ordinarily not favor me, which is of China, but I could still somehow contend that Deng Xiaoping's make certain regions rich first policy has in turn strengthened provinces, which have in turn helped the entire nation become the economic powerhouse that it is today. Of course, I can contend that. Yes. Right. Uh, Thank you very much for bringing this. I would once again reinforce the motion that we are discussing potential. The entire frame of my argument, if you listen to my speech, was the potential that these states carry. Now, again, abortion being banned, is that absolutely disdainful and against bodily autonomy of women? Yes, but then again, may I take that example and stretch it a bit further to talk about how abortion, in fact, became a national issue, or how national issues are created even at all. National policy, national issues are created right from the ground up. So you look at the local establishments that exist and the way that the states can help them. Now, if you look at sexuality being a discussion that takes place on a large scale, or the banning of books that may ban any sort of gender identity discussions, they all begin from the states promulgating those discussions, so they can reach a larger pedestal, or they could be discussed at a nationwide level. Of course, I have throughout my speech never contended that US or India, or for that matter any single nation, an absolute bulwark of federalism. There is not a single spot. It is entirely clean slate, and this we must aspire to be. No, I have taken independent issues from there to show how strength or certain autonomy being vested in certain states, how that can foster the help of the nation. So do I state that it's like saying that if a person is a habitual alcoholic, right, he should not consume a healthy diet, because that he would eventually die of the alcoholism anyway. We must ensure that both of these things can coexist, right? That person can get rid of this habit that he has, and he can also consume a healthy diet. So do we minimize the risks of a non-federalized nation being over centralized, and non-federalized nation become over centralized, and thus making risk for the entire nation at large? Yes, so that was my argument.